Portion this week, Vayeitzei, Jacob and his father-in-law Laban set up a matzeivot together in order to seal a pact of peace. This monument, a stone, stood upright as a pillar, surrounded by a mound of stones, serves two purposes. One, to memorialize the moment of the pact, and two, to act as a boundary marker. As Laban puts it, "Look, this mound, and look the pillar that I cast up between you and me. Witness be the mound, and witness the pillar, that I will not cross over to you past this mound, and you will not cross over to me past this mound and past this pillar for harm." Our early ancestors, like Jacob, raised matzeivot, these stones stood upright as a pillar, all the time. We know this from archaeology, but we also know this from the Torah. At the beginning of this week's Torah portion, Jacob sets one up to mark the spot of his famous dream of a ladder upon which angels entered and left our world, and he called the place Beit El. In next week's portion, he sets one up as a memorial to Rachel, his beloved wife, after she dies. But, strangely, we read in the book of Deuteronomy, "You shall not erect a matzeivah, a standing stone, for such Adonai your God detests." The rabbis of old are anything but clarifying as to this conflict about matzeivot. So many lauded characters in the Torah set them up, yet Deuteronomy prohibits them. Some say that this prohibition is only with regard to idolatry. Some say that it is only if one is going to use that matzeivah to offer sacrifices of incense. And some say any matzeivah at all is forbidden. Regardless of their estimation of the appropriateness of matzeivot, the rabbis tend to agree that the one set up by Jacob in Beit El is a precursor to the temple in Jerusalem, which would be built on that very same spot. Midrash tells us that the pillar began as a mound of stones, which in their fervor to be a part of this sacred space, magically assembled together into a single pillar for him to stand up. This means that the central location for our ancestors' connection with God, the place from which Torah would go forth, and the site which birthed the original unification of our people, was built upon a forbidden structure. The temple itself was actually seen as questionable by God at its founding. When David first suggested he build it, God responded saying, "Is it you who would build me a house for me to dwell in? For I have dwelled in no house from the day I brought up the Israelites out of Egypt until this day, but I have gone about in tent and tabernacle. Wherever I went about among all the Israelites, did I speak a word with any of the tribal chiefs of Israel, whom I charged to shepherd my people Israel, saying, 'Why did you not build me a cedar wood house?'" God is clearly rebuking the idea that God would need a permanent home stuck in one spot to dwell in at all. But we humans who do dwell in time and space, stuck in material limitations, want something tangible and stable. So God relented and allowed the temple to be built for our sake upon the similarly forbidden matzeivah of Jacob. With regard to the matzeivah that Jacob and Laban made together, there was both a mound of stones and a pillar that stood up. Quite different from the pillar that Jacob constructed at Beit El, these two monuments together represent two different orientations towards the way in which the sacred can impinge upon the normal. They act as guideposts in order to allow for those humans stuck in time and space who come across them to connect mindfully and differently with the space, be it sacred or profane. The matzeivah of Jacob's ladder is clearly in an up and down orientation, itself representing a meeting place between heaven and earth, and therefore representing Jacob's dream of the angels on their ladder coming up and down. The matzeivah and mound of Laban and Jacob has two orientations. The pillar creates that same sacred up and down axis, while the many different rocks around it create a permeable barrier between the sacred and profane. A Hasidic master of the last generation, Rabbi Menachem Mendel Schneerson, viewed this as a sacred barrier that allows Jacob to cross over into Laban's land without being tainted by the negative influences of Laban's corrupt philosophy of life. These structures connect two realms while also setting a clear boundary between them. The stones that are similar that we set up in cemeteries, as Jacob does for Rachel after her death next week, represent the same sort of impulse. They themselves reach downwards, down towards the remnants of the beloved dead, attempting to build a connection between us and them. Some, too, reach upwards, attempting to build a connection between the dead and the divine. Some, though, are mausoleums. They are houses, not unlike the temple in Jerusalem, which was built upon the place Jacob stood up his first matzeivot. This third kind of monument, not quite like the others, rather than reaching down or up or out, it invites us in. This third kind of monument is precisely the one which has become the essence of the Jewish building. When the first temple was destroyed, the prophet Ezekiel referred to buildings such as these in the diaspora as a mikdash ma'at, a small temple. After the second destruction of the temple in Jerusalem, our rabbis took this phrase to refer to synagogues and Jewish houses of study worldwide, as well as individual Jewish homes that issue forth Torah. The sages went even further, suggesting that the dinner table in a Jewish home is actually parallel to the altar that once stood in the temple in Jerusalem. This mikdash ma'at, this small temple, may actually be preferable to the large Jerusalem temple of old. They create personal sacred spaces in which the divine can dwell. And to reflect on the words of the psalmist, Tov ma'at l'tzadik mehamon reshaim rabim, ki zerot reshaim tishavarna v'somech tzadikim Adonai. The small, the me'at, is better for the righteous than the great is for the evil. For the strength of the evil shall be broken, while the righteous rely on Adonai. Today, in many ways, the difference between our mikdashim me'atim, the synagogues and homes, has been eradicated. We, when we wish to connect divinely, can set up our own matzeivot within our own temple. Just as Jacob's matzeivah existed as part of the temple in Jerusalem, be they a computer, tablet, or phone, our matzeivot bridge the gap of space between our own mikdashim ma'atim with sacred intention and contemporary technology. Just as we saw from Annabelle's Uncle Alan today, who is able to join us in our sanctuary via his matzeivah at home. These standing pillars of technology may not be permanent or stone structures like the ones that were set up by Jacob and our ancestors, but they do allow us to transcend our own small realms in order to reach into the wider sacred connection between us all. Although we also use them for profane things throughout the week, like business, our homes, our individual mikdashim me'atim, can allow us to turn these objects into sacred objects. Our homes, which protect us, envelop us, and at their best allow us to feel the presence of God through their shalom, their wholeness, and their peace, can transform these profane matzeivot into tools that connect us to each other and therefore to the divine. I pray that this Shabbat, each of you have felt this connection as you have joined us to celebrate our sacred day of rest. May each of you, wherever you are, find ways to create a mikdash me'at out of your homes by centering your intention, seeking a sense of connection, and grounding your sacred mindset in Torah. Then when we connect with each other through our matzeivot, we build a community of mikdashim me'atim, of small, sacred spaces, all joined together in time and space through the divine. Shabbat Shalom.